This country loves to flex how rich it is. But drive past the billboards and the stadium lights, and there are towns in America where the power flickers, the roads have given up, and the water out of the tap can give you a parasite. These are not edge cases. This is what happens when a zip code gets left off the map on purpose and then left off again and then left off for 60 years. No jobs, no safety net, no headlines, just quiet, and a $13,000 house that nobody will buy. Today I am taking you down the back roads, the parts of this country where the poverty looks like something out of a foreign news segment, and the real estate comes with a story that will sit on your chest. One of these towns had confirmed hookworm in America. One of them has 38 people living in it, no store and no working sewer. One of them still gets mail from FEMA addressed to current resident. And I am going to tell you the one thing about every house on this list that no video about cheap real estate has ever told you, which is that you cannot buy most of them. Not because they are not for sale, because of something else entirely. You do not need a down payment for any of this. You do not need a credit score. You do not need a real estate agent, and I say that as one. You do not need money at all. You need to understand one number, and it is not the price. My name is Ray Callahan. I sold houses for 31 years, mostly the Carolinas and up into East Tennessee, somewhere north of 1,100 closings. I have signed contracts on houses at $400,000, and I have signed them at $22,000. I have sat at closing tables in county seats you have never heard of. And in 31 years, I never once took a listing under $25,000. Not one. I turned them down. I want to be honest about why. Because it is not the reason you think, and it is the whole engine of this video. I have a bad back from 31 years of hauling signposts out of car trunks, and my wife will tell you I still cannot drive through a town without reading the storefronts. But I turn those listings down. Here is the part that should bother you. There is an entire content industry now built on these towns. Cheap house videos, $12,000 mansion videos, buy a whole street for the price of a car. Almost none of them will tell you that the majority of these houses cannot be bought with a mortgage. Not, will not, cannot. Because most banks in this country will not write a mortgage under about $60,000. Some will not go under $100,000. The reason is arithmetic, not malice. The origination cost on a mortgage is nearly fixed. The underwriting, the title work, the appraisal, the compliance, the servicing, it costs a lender roughly the same to write a $40,000 loan as a $400,000 loan. The revenue does not scale down with it, so the small loan is unprofitable and the unprofitable loan does not get made, which means the only people who can buy these houses are people who have the entire purchase price in cash. And that is not a working family. That is an investor. Nobody voted on that. There is no meeting. It is an incentive, and an incentive works every day of the year without anybody having to agree to anything. I am retired. I do not hold a license. Nobody pays me a split or a referral or a bonus. That is the only reason I can say this plainly. Here is the reframe that makes everything after it makes sense. A house that cannot be financed is not a cheap house. It is a stranded house. Cheap means you could buy it if you wanted to. Stranded means the price has nothing left to do. It cannot go up because nobody local can borrow against it. It cannot really go down because there is a floor under any structure with a roof. It just sits. And here is what that does to a town, and this is the part nobody follows through on. When no local family can get a loan, no local family builds equity. When no local family builds equity, nobody has collateral. When nobody has collateral, nobody starts a business. Nobody adds a room. Nobody passes anything down. The house stops being a way up and becomes a place to be. So when you look at these towns, do not look at the price. Look at whether a mortgage is possible there. That single question explains more about what you are about to see than poverty statistics ever will. I did not work that out on my own. My first broker was a man named Dale Whitmire, who had been selling farms and houses since 1958. Dale did not carry a briefcase. He carried a county map folded down to a square in his back pocket, gone soft as an old shirt from being opened and closed. Dale had a rule about towns. He said a town is either bottoming out or sliding, and they look exactly the same from the car window. He called the difference reading the ground. I will show you how to read it before we are done, because it is the most useful thing in this video, and it takes about 20 minutes and costs nothing. Now I owe you a correction, and I am giving it to you up front, before the list, because it costs me more here. You have probably heard that there were hookworm cases in rural Alabama in 2023. That is not quite right, and I am not going to repeat it just because it sounds worse. The study that found hookworm in Lowndes County, Alabama, was published in 2017 in a peer-reviewed tropical medicine journal. Researchers tested residents in an area with widespread failing septic systems and raw sewage on the ground, and a significant share tested positive for a parasite that is supposed to have been gone from this country for generations. 2017, not 2023. I want the date right because the real number is bad enough without me borrowing drama it does not need. And because if I stretch that one, you have no reason to believe the other 90 claims in this video. The sanitation problem in that county is real. It is documented. It has been the subject of federal attention, and as far as I can tell, it is not solved. All right, 10 towns. Number 10, Cairo, Illinois. There is a town in this country where the population fell by more than 80%, and the streetlights still come on every night for people who never came back. Cairo sits where the Mississippi and the Ohio meet. On paper, that is destiny. For a while, it was. River trade, rail, factories. Then the rivers mattered less, the jobs left, and the leaving never stopped. The population went from around 15,000 in 1920 to under 2,000 today. That is not decline. That is evacuation by economics. Houses list routinely between $10,000 and $25,000. Some sit unsold for years. The poverty rate runs above 40%. Entire blocks are boarded. The utilities still run, and you find yourself asking for who. A local wrote once that Cairo feels like a movie set after the crew packed up and forgot to say cut. Here is the trap. Cheap housing does not mean cheap living. When the jobs are gone and the services are far, every dollar stretches thinner, not further. Isolation is expensive. You can buy a house there for the price of a used Honda. Then your commute is unemployment. Number 9, Camden, New Jersey. Camden is where you can see Philadelphia's skyline from your porch and still have trouble getting your trash picked up. It sits directly across the Delaware from downtown Philadelphia. Walking distance, if there were a walkway. And it has been stuck in an economic loop since the 1980s. Camden is what happens when gentrification occurs around a place instead of in it. Median house price has run in the neighborhood of $17,000 to $23,000. The poverty rate is above 36%, roughly triple the national number. Unemployment frequently runs double national. Violent crime has run several times the U.S. average, and Camden has been on most dangerous city lists for over a decade. And here is the twist that makes it worse rather than better. Since around 2013, more than $2 billion in public and private money has gone into Camden. Corporate campuses, a waterfront, police reorganization. So why are the blocks still crumbling? Because that money came in through the front door and walked straight past the people upstairs. Now put my mechanism on top of it. Try getting a bank to write a mortgage on a $23,000 house in Camden. You will not. So the corporate campus goes up, The land around it gets bought in cash by people who do not live there, and the family that has been on that block for 40 years gets none of the appreciation. That is not a housing market. That is a transfer. Number 8, East St. Louis, Illinois. You know a place is in trouble when the last big economic driver is departure. East St. Louis is not a city that failed. It is a city that was systematically abandoned and then blamed for the fallout. Those are different things, and the difference matters. It sits directly across the Mississippi from the Gateway Arch. Life expectancy there has run as much as 10 years below the national average. Median house price has run around $18,000, which sounds like a steal until you see that some of the structures do not have all 4 walls. The poverty rate runs above 40%. Violent crime has repeatedly ranked in the top 5 nationally, some years number 1. There are neighborhoods without reliable water, working streetlights, or trash collection. How did it get there? Short version, an industrial base that left in the 60s and 70s, white flight, redlining, and a tax base that collapsed underneath all of it. The state of Illinois has overseen the city's finances for decades. School buildings have had documented mold and structural failures. And every few years, somebody arrives with a revitalization plan that reads more like a conference talk than a work order. You think the house is cheap. What you are actually buying is the absence of everything a house is supposed to sit inside of. Number 7, Selma, Alabama. Selma changed the course of American history, and you would think America would have shown up for Selma afterward. It did not. The Edmund Pettus Bridge is in every textbook, but once the cameras left, the investment left with them. This is what happens when a place becomes a symbol instead of a priority. Median house price has run around $22,000 to $25,000. You can buy history for the price of a used pickup. The poverty rate runs somewhere near 40%. Population is down more than a quarter since the 1960s. There is one main hospital serving the area, and it has been financially unstable. Now here is the honest part about Selma that most videos get wrong. The threat in Selma is not violence. It is stagnation. It is the slow grind of watching your young people leave because the opportunity left first. Somebody there wrote that people come to see the bridge and then ask where everybody went. That question answers itself. You cannot pay a light bill with historical significance. Selma gets commemorated instead of funded. There are plaques and anniversaries and reenactments, and then the budget tightens when it comes to schools and clinics and roads. Selma fought for voting rights. Now it is fighting for streetlights. Number 6, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff is not poor because it is small. It is poor because it was useful until it was not. This is a city that did exactly what the country asked of it. Worked the land, ran the mills, fed the factories. And when the margins moved offshore, Pine Bluff got the corporate version of "we will call you." They did not call. Median house price has run around $21,000 to $24,000, with listings dipping below 15. Poverty runs around a third of the population. Violent crime has run several times the national rate. The population is down more than a quarter since 2000. Decline here is not subtle. It is visible from the road. Empty storefronts, overgrown lots where houses used to stand, blocks that feel paused in the middle of a sentence. And here is the state-level part. Most economic development money in Arkansas flows toward the northwest corner of the state, toward the places already doing fine. Pine Bluff does not get triage. The most reliable regional employer is the correctional system. That is not development. That is containment. Number 5, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown has survived 3 floods, 1 factory exodus, and a tourism economy built on its own tragedy. And it is still standing. Barely, but standing. The 1889 flood killed more than 2,000 people and made Johnstown a national symbol of rebuilding. A century and change later, the flooding is still an issue. The water just comes slower now. So does the help. Median house price has run around $22,000, with many listings under $15,000. The population went from over 60,000 in the 1950s to somewhere around 18,000 today. Poverty runs above 35%, and child poverty higher than that. The steel collapse hit, and the city never really came back. What is left feels like a museum to loss. Beautiful hills, rusted bridges, and extraordinary quiet. Johnstown falls under a federal regional commission designed to help struggling Appalachian places, and the funding that does arrive tends to land in the towns, with photogenic main streets and fewer collapsing bridges. Living there is like being with somebody who is not over their ex. You hear constantly about how good the steel years were. Now the downtown is thrift shops and real estate signs faded enough to be artifacts. Number 4, Marianna, Arkansas. Marianna was once known for barbecue good enough to make national lists. Now it has more boarded buildings than working traffic lights. It sits deep in the Arkansas Delta. Median house price has run somewhere between $17,000 and $23,000. The poverty rate is over 45%, among the highest in the nation. Median household income has run around $22,000 a year, less than half the U.S. figure. This is the seat of Lee County, which has ranked among the poorest counties in the entire United States for decades. Again, one of the only notable investments in the area is prison-related. In places like Marianna, incarceration gets more attention than education, and that is a choice somebody made in a budget meeting. You can buy a house here for less than the price of a phone. What you are buying into is broken road, aging infrastructure, a grocery store that carries more soda than produce, and a place the system quietly decided was not worth saving without telling the people still living in it. Number 3, Allenville, Missouri. Allenville does not really have a downtown because the town flooded and never got put back together. Population, roughly 38 people. That is not a typo. That is fewer people than a marching band, and it is still on the census. Some houses have listed under $6,000. There is no functioning sewer system. Electricity is limited. The roads are the kind you think twice about in a rental car. Local employment is essentially ceremonial. The flooding is not one headline. It is recurrent. Repeated inundation has made basic infrastructure unreliable, and what does not show up after the water goes down is consistent state or federal money. Local officials have petitioned, they have applied for grants, they have proposed levees and drainage, and the larger towns nearby, with bigger tax bases and louder representatives, get funded first every time. Cheap here is not freedom, it is abandonment with a price tag on it. Number 2, Whitehall, Alabama in Lowndes County. This is the sanitation one. This is where the hookworm study was done. The median house price has run around $19,000 to $20,000. Poverty runs near 40%, and the county figure is higher. Healthcare access means driving. And the septic problem is the thing you have to understand because it is not a metaphor. Large parts of that county sit on dense clay soil that conventional septic systems do not work in. A proper system for that soil can run well past $20,000, which is more than the house. So people have made do with straight pipes and open discharge, and some of them have been threatened with fines for it. That is the loop. The soil requires an expensive system. The house is worth less than the system. No bank will lend on the house, so the system never gets installed and the sewage stays on the ground. You cannot solve that with a jobs program. It is a plumbing problem wearing an economics problem's clothes. State and federal money for rural infrastructure exists. It rarely reaches towns where the applications bounce off a small tax base and no political leverage. The place has been in reports, in academic papers, in health journals, in hazard assessments. Documentation is not intervention. That is the whole lesson. Number 1, Gloucester, Mississippi. If this country keeps pretending places like this do not exist, Gloucester is what the future looks like, just quieter and cheaper and easier to ignore. It is not number 1 because it is worst in every category. It is number 1 because it is the clearest example of how neglect actually works. Gloucester does not riot or trend. It fades. It sits in southwest Mississippi, near the Louisiana line. It was a timber town. The mills closed, and when the mills left, so did the reason for the town to exist. Population around 850, down steadily for decades. Median house price roughly $13,000 to $18,000. The poverty rate is close to half. No grocery store, no pharmacy, no dentist. Healthcare means driving. Gloucester is not unsafe in a chaotic way. It is unsafe in a structural way. If something goes wrong, your health, your money, the weather, there is no backup. There is just distance. Somebody there said they do not leave because they hate it. They leave because there is nothing to grow into. That is the whole story. Now, the part that is not in any other video on this subject, and the reason I made this instead of just reading you a list. Dale said a town is either bottoming out or sliding, and from the car window, they look identical. Boarded storefronts either way. Cheap houses either way. But they are not the same investment and they are not the same life, and you can tell them apart in about 20 minutes with 3 phone calls. This works for any town in America. Use it on your own. The first number is building permits. Call the county or city permitting office and ask how many residential permits were issued last year, and the year before, and the year before that. Not the dollar value, the count. A town that is bottoming out has a small number that stopped falling. A town that is sliding has a number still going down. Somebody spending real money to put a roof on a house in a dying town knows something a statistic does not. The second number is school enrollment. Call the school district and ask for total enrollment for the last 5 years. They keep it and they will give it to you. Enrollment is the only honest population number you can get because it is counted every single year and the state funding depends on it. Census figures are 10 years apart and estimates in between. Enrollment tells you whether families with children are arriving or leaving right now. If enrollment is falling faster than the population, that town is not just shrinking, it is aging out, which means the school consolidates, then the clinic, then the grocery, in that order. It happens in that order almost every time. The third number is delinquent parcels. Call the county tax collector and ask what percentage of parcels in the county are delinquent on property taxes. This is the one nobody checks, and it is the most predictive of the 3. A delinquent parcel is somebody who has decided the house is not worth the tax bill. When that number is climbing, you are watching people mathematically abandon their own property in real time. Under 5% is an ordinary county having ordinary problems. When it gets into the double digits, the tax base is coming apart, and everything the county pays for is on a clock. 3 calls, 15 or 20 minutes, free. And if you do this on a town on this list, you will find something that will surprise you, which is that they do not all read the same. A couple of them are bottoming out. Most of them are still sliding. Nobody paid me for any of this. There is nothing in the description to buy. I do not have a license anymore, so I cannot represent you, refer you, or take a piece of anything. There is no course, no email list, no consultation. I have a pension, a paid-off house, and a dog who has never once been impressed by anything I have said. Here is why I bothered. Every one of these towns has people in it. Right now, this morning. People who did not fail at anything, who worked at the mill or the plant or the rail yard, who did what the country asked and stayed while it was being asked of them. And the way these places get talked about now is as content, as a curiosity, as a thing to gawk at from the car with the windows up. I do not want to add to that. So I will say the part that makes this a real estate video and not a poverty tour. If you buy a $13,000 house in one of these towns with cash and you rent it back to somebody who lives there for $600 a month, you will make an excellent return. That is the actual math, and it is why the investors are already there. You will also be the reason that family never owns anything. That is not against the law. Nobody will stop you. But you asked what these houses cost, and that is part of the price, and I am not going to pretend it is not. The problem in these towns is not that the houses are cheap. It is that a working family cannot borrow against a cheap house, so the only buyers left are people with cash and no address in that county. So here's your homework. Pick one town, any town, off this list or your own. Call the permitting office and ask for the residential permit count for the last 3 years. Call the school district and ask for 5 years of enrollment. Call the tax collector and ask for the delinquency rate. And before you make an offer anywhere, call a small local bank in that county, not a national lender, and ask one question. Do you write portfolio loans on properties under $50,000 in this county? Small local banks and credit unions sometimes hold loans on their own books instead of selling them, and those are the institutions that will still write a small mortgage. It is not common, but it exists, and none of the big lenders will ever tell you it does. Tell me in the comments what state you are watching from and the name of the town nearest you that used to have a factory. Just those 2 things. I read every one of them. And the townsfolk's name down there are half of how I pick what to look at next. Next time I am going to show you how to check the water before you buy anything, anywhere, well or municipal, it does not matter. There is one test that costs about $30 that almost nobody runs, and that will tell you in 10 days whether a property is worth what somebody is asking for it. The mistake people make is that they run it after the offer instead of before, and by then the answer does not help them anymore. Until then, read the ground, count the permits, buy the county.